Hello, Tim Kerin here from Mortgage Choice in Kingsley. Today I want to talk a little bit about credit ratings and credit scores and how they might affect you. The main reason for this is that there's quite a lot of a difference between the way things work in Australia and the way they do in the rest of the world. And that's caused quite a bit of confusion out there over the years. So I'll just break it down. So up until March 2014, the way the law in Australia worked, the way the Privacy Act worked, is that lenders and credit providers were only allowed to provide information on your credit file about whether you'd applied for finance and for how much and what type of finance it was, not whether or not they approved it. The other information they were allowed to provide is whether or not you had defaulted on the loan. That is, if you defaulted, they had the ability to note that. And when they did, they noted whether you had paid it or not paid it as well. What that means is up until March 2014, everybody's credit file simply shows information about whether they've applied for a loan, not necessarily whether there's good or bad conduct, unless it's gone bad enough that the lender has decided to lodge a default. And in that situation, it simply says that there's a default. That's what we see in the majority of cases. Now, in March 2014, the Privacy Act changed to allow lenders to start disclosing more information from that. But it was on an information in, information out basis, which means a lender's only able to look up more information than that about you if they give up more information than that about their existing customers. And what that means is that for lenders to take advantage of the extra information, they've actually had to rebuild their software to the point where they can disclose more information. And as a result, 3 years on, it's 2017 at the time of recording this, most lenders still do not disclose any more information than they used to years ago. So most people's credit files simply show when they've applied for credit and if there's a default, and not much else. The next thing to note is that this information stays on your credit file for a maximum of 5 years. So if you applied for a loan 6 years ago, and then you paid it off, or you're still paying it off, your credit file doesn't show anything about this at the moment. If you applied for a loan 1 year ago, then your credit file probably shows that you applied for it, and unless you've defaulted on it, that's probably all it says about it, apart from the amount, who it was with, and what sort of a loan it was. It's possible these days, and lenders are gradually moving to it at a very, very slow rate, to the point where I've hardly ever seen any evidence of it, but it's possible that they might be disclosing more information about this, such as how you're going with your repayments, now that that's legally possible and has only been so for the last few years. So most people's credit files simply show that level of information. It's what's been called a negative credit reporting system, in the light of how things work in the rest of the world, which is generally referred to as a positive credit reporting system, where positive information that you're up to date with your repayments, for example, can also be reported about you. That's now legally possible in Australia for the first time, only for the last few years, but lenders aren't doing it yet, generally speaking. That's what your credit file is about, and your credit rating is something you could infer from looking at a credit file. When you look up a credit file on Vita, for example, what's actually called Equifax now, that will generally give you a score as well. But that's not what lenders are referring to in the world of home loans, for example, when they talk about your credit score. When a lender does a credit score, they use far more than just your credit file to figure it out. They'll look at your credit file, and that'll form part of the score, but they'll also look at things like how long you've been in your job for, how long you've been living where you're living for, how much wealth you have personally in relation to your age, and all sorts of other factors. In fact, in some cases, it's simply a matter of whether or not we put BSB and account numbers in the application form. If we leave them out, it can reduce your credit score. And lenders use their credit score. Not all of them do this, but a lot of lenders these days are using their own internal credit score to figure out how much risk to take with lending you money. So it's important for us as mortgage brokers, for example, to make sure we get all the information perfectly correct and do as much data entry as we can when we submit a loan application, because this can actually have a positive impact on your credit score and how positively or negatively an assessor approaches your loan application. So there's quite a lot to it, and if you're not sure what's going on in your credit file in particular, or what your credit rating might be, or how your credit score might go if you apply to a lender, well, we have access to your credit file. That is, if you sign a privacy form and allow us under the Privacy Act to access your credit file and ID yourselves to us, then we can do a credit check and show you exactly what's going on. So if you'd like us to help with that for you, just let us know. Thanks.